Okay, everybody, welcome to the fifth Splice Lores. This is recorded on June 19th, 2020. It is Freedom Day in Singapore. We are able to finally congregate in cafes. So it's really nice to see everybody here. We've all kind of made it out on this side of the fence, at least. Thank you for joining us today. So today we are talking about diversity in media with Kabahala Ria, which is a fantastic media organization based in northern India. We'll do proper introductions in a second. You're going to hear from two fantastic women who lead what is probably one of the most inspiring, how do we describe this, Rashad? Community-focused media companies that's doing a great job in reporting. So we'll get into that in a second. A little bit about Splice for those who are joining us for the first time. We've got a lot of repeat attendees this time, which is always so wonderful to see. But for those of us who are joining us for those of you who are joining us for the first time, very quickly, a little bit about Splice. We care a lot about the transformation of media in Asia, and we think that the best way to transform media in this region is to support the entry of diverse media startups. So what we do is we report on what's going on in the media scene. We hold events like these to help elevate and showcase some of the great talent that's around us, and we're also funding some of these.
We have a couple of very quick announcements we want to make just before we get this rolling and turn the focus back on Kabahala Ria. We just wanted to say that we started getting our Lights On funding out. These are emergency grants to 56 grantees that applied from 17 countries. There were over 170 applications. And we're looking for people that have a COVID-19 plan, either editorially or organizationally or strategically. We're delighted to be able to be getting these out. Please go to the Lights On page. We'll send you this deck later, or just do a search for Splice Lights On, and you'll find who they are and what they're doing with their grants. We're also really excited to announce the 6 grantees of the Splice Beta Fund. This just makes us so happy. Himal South Asian, Podmetrics, Puma Podcast is here, Sujag from Pakistan, The Conversation from Indonesia are here, and TB are here, and we're so excited. This is a prototyping grant that we wanted to give out with the help of Facebook Journalism Project. Big thanks to them for making this and the Lights On funding available. We want to get these grants out to these prototyping grants out so that these newsrooms can test media products with audiences. We're very excited to start working with them through this year. Let's see what they come up with.
So this is our fifth Lores. It's our way of wanting to celebrate what people are doing in spite of COVID. I know that at the start of the year, there was a lot of anxiety within the industry around what COVID meant for the media industry. And so if you look here, for the last 5 sessions, we've always checked in, always asked, how are you doing? What's going on? How are you surviving this difficult time? And it's been a really great way to continue building on the community. We love the work that all of you do, and we have plenty of respect for what's being done out there. So thank you for being part of our 5th show. So far in total, we've had about 700 plus registrations over the 5 different events, low-res events that we've done. 26 speakers. We've had 16 women, 12 men. We're very proud of this number across 4 continents. We've done a total of 14 hours now of live programming, which is so gratifying to think that, even earlier this year, the start of the year, we never thought that we would ever be able to accomplish anything like that in doing a video event. And here we are.
I just wanted to acknowledge and shout out to all the people that are here. Thank you so much for coming. as before, we've got Puma and the conversation, but we also have Gateway Dance. I just want to shout out that's a dance company in Des Moines, run by my aunt. We've got Christine from the Thompson Foundation, Arts Equator, MDIF, I mean, EJC, Mia Vox, of course. Outriders is coming, OSF is coming. We're just delighted to see all of you here. Sunny from Frontier is here. Shalini Joshi, one of the co-founders of Khabar Lahariya, is here from Medan. Code Story is coming. We're just absolutely delighted. Thank you for coming. I just want to quickly run you through the schedule. These are the introductions, in case you missed that. And we're going to very quickly jump to actually talking with the amazing Kavita and Disha from Khabar Lahariya. We're focusing very clearly on how diversity plays out in India, just to get a quick level set. We want to ask them what diversity means to you and Khabar Lahariya. What does it mean in your context? And if you had to teach it to different newsrooms around the world, we believe that in order to represent audiences, diverse audiences, you probably need your newsroom to be diverse as well. We'd also like to say we believe in BYOB, bring your online beverage. Feel free to have a coffee or a beer, join us for a drink. I know Alan's going to break out his beer very soon. And we'll have Q&A. We will also introduce you to the Splice Beta Fund grantees, maybe have a little hello from them later if we have time. That's it. Feel free to pop your questions into the chat box, and we'll ask the speakers, and later we'll just open it up and we can all chat. Quick ground rules, some housekeeping. Feel free to tweet with the hashtag. Always better if you use headphones and microphones for sound clarity. Get some good light, leave comments, questions, links. Please introduce yourselves in the chat box. We will also send these links out in an email to all of you later. Again, just basic, just put yourself on mute. We're going to put this on YouTube later. We'll send you a feedback form. I also want to say that we had this once. Porn bombing is a thing. Some freak or the other showed up and try to do this porn thing. It's not a big deal. We're all grown-ups. We tend to just bump them and move along. And hey, be kind to everybody, to each other. That's really it.
So before we get into the introductions properly of our two speakers, I want to show you a very quick 1-minute video that was shot about Khabar Lahariya. It'll give you a quick glimpse around how they work, what do they do, and why they're as amazing as we think they are. This was a video that was done about a year ago by Google News Initiative. Let me just quickly play this, and we'll come back soon.
क्या स्थिति है खेतों की, क्यों ऐसे बैठे हैं?
पानी नहीं है साहब, बिना पानी के बच नहीं जाएगा तो सोचे क्या।
बांदा और चित्रकूट है। यहाँ पे एक ऐसा मंच है जो खबर लहरिया अखबार है, जिसमें महिला रिपोर्टर हैं। उनमें से मैं हूँ एक, मेरा नाम गीता है। आज मैं नारायणी ब्लॉक के नौगावा गांव में मौजूद। यहाँ के लोगों का कहना है कि यहाँ लगभग 20 साल पहले नहर खुदवाई गई थी, लेकिन आज तक नहर में पानी नहीं आया।
गांव में प्रॉब्लम्स होती है, कभी अधिकारी को पता होता है वो सुनते नहीं है, या कभी उनको लगता है कि कोई हमसे पूछने वाला नहीं है। तब जब वो फिर से पब्लिश हुई और जब अधिकारी पक्ष तक वो खबर पहुंची है, उसके बाद उन नहरों में फिर से पानी छोड़ा गया था।
News is not just what is on the headlines of big newspapers, but a hand pump which is broken in a village which is 50 kilometers away from the district headquarters, वो इतना ही जरूरी न्यूज़ है।
How amazing is that? So, ladies and gentlemen, we present to you Kavita Devi and Disha Malik from Khabar Lahariya. Let me pull this away so you can actually see their faces. So let's start with the very first question. The whole point of this conversation is around diversity, and diversity means a lot to a lot of people. And you at Caballeriya have had this discussion for a very long time now. Can you tell us a little bit about, well, first of all, how the organization came about, but more importantly, what is your definition of diversity in the context of India?
Thanks a lot for the introduction. It always makes us well up when we see that video, so it's always good to watch again.
Same here.
Thanks, Vishal. I wanted to say that it's really gratifying and cool, I think, to talk about this topic for me and Kavita together to be chatting about this topic, because what we generally talk about in terms of Khabar Lahariya and the model, and even in terms of diversity and what that looks like, is usually in terms of what you see in that video, which is, you know, the content that Khabar Lahariya produces and what it looks like to the outside world. And we don't very often get to talk about the inner workings of the newsroom and what kind of dynamics and what kinds of quite intense and long-term and sustained processes that involves. So I think that just to frame the chat in that context is it's really good, I think, for us to be able to reflect on our processes and to be able to share that with other peers in the community. I think I'll say a couple of things and then I'll also pass it on to Kavita to talk about this, because what's unique about KL is that we have the perspectives of both someone like me, who's urban, English-speaking, upper caste, and also someone like Kavita, who's a co-founder and is Dalit, has been part of non-formal education systems and then formal education systems as well, and has had a long journey through literacy and into media. So what she thinks is diversity and what she sees from the local perspective, I think, is quite crucial. And I also just wanted to nod to what's happening in the States and what's happening all over the world, and in terms of what that means for what the meaning of diversity is and how the media looks at it and how we tell stories and who tells those stories. I just think that that's really crucial to be thinking about all the time. So in the Indian context, and I think in Khabar Lahariya's context, caste has been crucial to the way that we've understood diversity. I think that the idea for Khabar Lahariya, and Kavita will speak more about this, was twofold. It was to be able to have a voice in the media, which was not the voice that we hear generally, the mainstream journalist voice, and that mainstream journalist voice generally being male and upper class and having access to privilege of different kinds, educational, geographic, other sources of power and influence. And the other thing was to have stories in the mainstream media which were not being covered by the mainstream media. So how do those voices and how do those stories have a part to play in the media narrative? And the context has been and continues to be, I think, and it is interesting to talk about this in terms of digital media right now, that the media, like a lot of other domains of knowledge, like the university systems or other knowledge systems, are controlled by upper castes. In India, the caste system has meant that you're born into certain kinds of roles and livelihoods generationally and over centuries. And those at the top of the knowledge of the caste hierarchy are also those who have access to knowledge, the creation of it and the consumption of it. And traditionally, Dalits, who are outside of the caste system or the lowest fringes of the caste system, have not had access to knowledge, education, and everything that comes with that. So there have been, over the last maybe 20 years, there have been, or the last decade, I would say, there have been studies that have been done to make this visible, that in fact the control of the media industry, like the control of the media industry internationally, is in the hands of those who have access to social capital and social power, and those are upper caste men mostly. I don't know if those links were visible. I tried to paste them earlier, but I did try and pull out 3 or 4 studies from the last 5 or 6 years and right up to last year, which also talks to the context of digital media and that ownership of media in India has not really shifted, even though we do have more independent digital platforms that are producing different kinds of news. The ownership of it still remains in the hands of upper caste men. But I'm just going to pass this over to Kavita. Kavita?
जी दीदी।
हाँ, तो सवाल और जिस पर मैंने भी थोड़ा रिस्पॉन्ड किया है कविता, सवाल ये है कि हम विविधता को क्या समझते हैं और विविधता के क्या मायने हैं भारत के संदर्भ में, और जो अन्य पहचान है वो मीडिया की दुनिया में किस तरह की भूमिका निभाते हैं, हमने इसको किस तरह से समझा है और खबर लहरिया ने इसको किस तरह से समझा है।
ओके ओके ओके। तो आपने बोल दिया ना इसको?
मैंने थोड़े इंडिया के कॉन्टेक्स्ट के बारे में बोला है। मुझे लग रहा था कि जो स्थानीय संदर्भ है और अभी किस तरह के लोग मीडिया में हैं या मीडिया को ओन करते, मीडिया के जो मालिक हैं, अभी क्या है?
हाँ तो मैं शुरू करती हूँ। मैं थोड़ा सा बताना चाहूंगी कि अन्य मीडिया का संदर्भ जो हम देख रहे हैं या जो विविधता क्या है और खबर लहरिया का क्या है, तो मैं उसको बताना चाहती हूँ। तो जब से मैं काम कर रही हूँ, मेरे को 20 साल हो गए खबर लहरिया में काम करते हुए। तो जब मैं शुरू किया था या जब मैं खबर लहरिया में जुड़ी भी नहीं थी, तब मैं देख रही थी कि मीडिया में क्या है। तो पहली बात तो मैं मीडिया को जानती ही नहीं थी कि क्या मीडिया है, मीडिया शब्द क्या होता है, अखबार क्या होता है, क्योंकि हम लोगों को उससे बहुत दूर रखा गया था। हमें नहीं मालूम था कि पेपर क्या होता है, इसमें न्यूज़ें भी होती हैं। जब मैं खबर लहरिया में जुड़ी तब मैंने देखा कि खबर लहरिया में हम औरतें हैं, बाकी जो लोकल की मीडिया है वहाँ पर जो पत्रकार है वो पुरुष हैं, मर्द हैं। ज्यादातर जो मर्द हैं वो शहरी क्षेत्र के हैं, वो उच्च जाति के हैं, वो ज्यादा पढ़े हैं, या जो जो पैसे वाले लोग हैं, अमीर लोग हैं, या जो ठेकेदार हैं वो हैं, या जो राजनीतिक पार्टी से जुड़े हुए लोग हैं वो मतलब इस क्षेत्र में हैं। और मैं ये भी देख रही थी जब खबर लहरिया में जुड़ते जुड़ते हमारी समझ बनी कि उन पेपरों में फिर खबर किस तरह की आती है। तो जो खबर भी आ रही थी, जब मैं पेपर पढ़ रही थी, उनमें जो खबरें थी वो राजनीतिक खबरें थी। राजनीति के क्षेत्र में क्या हो रहा है या ज्यादातर उच्च वर्ग से जुड़ी हुई खबरें थी, शहरी खबरें थी। तो मैं वो विविधता मैं उसको विविधता नहीं मानती हूँ। जो खबर या का जो सोचना है, जो उद्देश्य है, जो हमने उसमें शामिल किया, तो मैं खबर लहरिया के संदर्भ का में जो विविधता है मैं उसको शेयर करती हूँ। मतलब ये मोटा शेयर था अन्य मीडिया।
कविता, एक सेकंड, मैं थोड़ा जल्दी से थोड़ा शेयर करना चाहती हूँ।
बड़े बड़े मीडिया हाउसेस में मैं वहां पर भी मैंने देखा है कि जो मीडिया के मालिक है वो पुरुष है, जो रिपोर्टर्स है वो पुरुष है। जो जिम्मेदारियां बटी होती हैं वो शायद इन चीजों को देख करके कि कौन करेगा, उसमें जाति देखी जाती है, अन्य मीडिया में धर्म भी देखा जाता है, औरत और आदमी का भी देखा जाता है। तो जब खबर लहरिया में जो विविधता है, तो मैं शुरुआत से बस ये कहना चाहती हूँ कि जब हमने अखबार को शुरू किया था तो शुरू से ही हमने अपने उद्देश्य में ही हमने इस विविधता को शामिल किया था कि सबसे पहले तो हम महिलाओं को खबर लहरिया न्यूज चैनल में जोड़ेंगे, क्योंकि कहीं और भी महिलाएं पत्रकार नहीं हैं। तो हमने सबसे पहले औरतों के बारे में सोचा कि औरतों को पत्रकारिता की दुनिया से अलग रखा गया है, और ये जो पितृसत्तात्मक समाज है हमारा, इनका सोचना और इनकी जो मानसिकता है कि पत्रकारिता का क्षेत्र जो हो कठिन काम है, इसको औरतें नहीं कर सकती हैं, औरतें कोमल होती हैं, उनको पर्दे में रखना चाहिए, और वो अगर बाहर जाएंगी तो उनकी वो क्या करेंगी, वो गलत काम करेंगी। तो मतलब इस तरह की जो सोच है, या तो कोई मर्दों से बात करेंगी या भाग जाएंगी या प्यार मोहब्बत करेंगी, तो ये था। दूसरा जो है कि सत्ता कहीं ना कहीं महिलाओं के हाथ में आ जाएगी, और उस लकीर को जो है हम तोड़ना चाहते थे। तो पहले सबसे बड़ी विविधता हम औरतों को उतारे पत्रकारिता के क्षेत्र में ये थी। फिर ये था कि खबर कहाँ की होगी, क्योंकि जब हम अन्य मीडिया में देख रहे थे कि उनमें खबरें किस तरह से, जो मैंने आपको मोटा मोटा बताया, हमने सोचा कि अगर हम महिलाओं को जोड़े हैं तो जो औरतें हैं वो सिर्फ उच्च जाति की नहीं होंगी, जो औरतें भी हैं वो हाशिए पर रहने वाली होंगी। हाशिए पर रहने वाली वो औरतें हैं जो दलित हैं, जो मुसलमान हैं, जो आदिवासी हैं, जो गरीब औरतें हैं, जो ग्रामीण औरतें हैं, जिनकी शिक्षा इतनी ज्यादा नहीं है। क्योंकि जब खबर लहर की शुरुआत हुई 2002 में, उस टाइम पे महिलाएं 2 तक और बहुत मुश्किल से हमको 5वीं तक पढ़ी औरतें मिली। हम ऐसी औरतों को उतारे। खबर क्या होगी, तो जब हम ऐसी औरतों को ग्राउंड लेवल से लाए तो हम ग्रामीण की खबरें करेंगे, क्योंकि अन्य मीडिया में गांव की खबरें नहीं है, विकास की खबरें नहीं है, सिर्फ राजनीति से भरा या सबसे ज्यादा विज्ञापन से भरा। हमने
कविता
सोचा कि
जी,
हम
एक मिनट, सॉरी, मैं इंटरप्ट कर सकता हूँ 1 मिनट के लिए? अ, अ, मुझे लग रहा है कि अगर Disha, maybe if you translated more often or just
Yeah.
with shorter segments, does that work for everybody? You know, I think if we filled in little bits and pieces, I think it's good that you're doing it in the chat box, but maybe we've got a lot of people missing out a lot of important things that Kavita is saying. So maybe if we had shorter segments, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I did try to translate a little bit on the fly, but I think that a couple of important points that Kavita is making, and she's also traveled through.
Sorry Kavita, मैं इनको
सॉरी बस मैं ये कह रही हूँ कि मेरी बात अभी पूरी नहीं हुई, आप इतना ट्रांसलेट करिए, अभी और मुझे बोलना है।
हाँ, absolutely.
Translate करना है।
Yeah.
So I think that she has moved also from the external environment and traced her personal journey and brought it into Khabar Lahariya and Khabar Lahariya's evolution. So that's quite interesting. She was saying that as a Dalit young girl, she was very distanced from the world of media. And so who was in the media and who was creating it was really a world that was very apart. And once she started working as a journalist within Khabar Lahariya, then it became more and more obvious that the other people in her surrounding kind of media environment were all not only upper caste men, but men with a certain access to education and influence. So they were either people with connections to political parties or politicians themselves, or they were businessmen. And so you had to have that kind of financial and social capital to be in the world of media. And then you created stories and news accordingly. And so the way in which strategically over time we have seen the issue of diversity and also maybe made our vision and made our objective more and more clear and focused over the years is to hire only women from a certain marginalized, not just caste, but also religion, also ethnicity to the team, whether or not they had even basic literacy skills, but it was important for us to hire that kind of a voice and then work with that voice to produce the kind of content that we needed to produce. Because for us, the kind of content we were producing was not really separate from the kind of team that we were hiring and mentoring to be journalists. They were both very linked.
And if I could jump in with a quick kind of follow-up question to this, as a way to set context for everyone to understand, are the stories that you produce at Khabar Lahariya, are these stories about women or are they stories?
Yeah. Okay, I'm just trying to think whether Kavita should answer this or I should. Kavita?
हाँ।
खबरें हम खबर लहरिया में करते हैं, वो किस तरह की खबरें हैं? क्या वो सिर्फ महिलाओं से संबंधित खबरें हैं?
नहीं, तो मैं यही बताने वाली थी आगे। मैं उसी से फिर जोड़ूंगी कि अन्य मीडिया में विविधता क्या है, खबर लहरिया में क्या है। तो जब हमने शुरू किया तो ये नहीं था कि हम औरतें हैं तो हम सिर्फ जो खबरें हैं वो हम औरतों की ही करेंगे, हम महिलाओं से संबंधित मुद्दे ही करेंगे, क्योंकि और ऐसा था भी क्योंकि समाज का सोचना था। जो लोग खबर लहरिया को शुरुआत में जानने लगे थे उनकी सोच ऐसी थी कि अभी ये औरतें अगर पत्रकारिता के क्षेत्र में आई हैं तो सिर्फ ही औरतों के बारे में लिखेंगी। हमने कहा नहीं, औरतों के बारे में हम नहीं लिखेंगे। तो हमने ग्राउंड लेवल, हमने गांव की रिपोर्टिंग करी ऐसे गांव में हम गए जहाँ की आवाजें नहीं पहुंच रही थी, जहाँ की आवाजें मीडिया में नहीं आ रही थी। तो आदिवासियों का इलाका था, जंगली इलाका था, ऐसे इलाके थे जहाँ तक मीडिया की पहुंच नहीं थी। और डाकुओं का इलाका था। हमने ग्रामीण स्तर पर पानी की समस्या, बिजली की समस्या, और जो जो सरकारी धन का जब बंदर बांट होता है, जो घोटाले होते हैं, हमने उसका भंडा फोड़ किया। हम जो खबरें करते हैं, जैसे सिर्फ विकास की खबरें नहीं, खबरों में अनेक तरह की विविधताएं हैं। तो औरतों से जुड़े हुए मुद्दे हैं, तो सिर्फ मारपीट या हिंसा के मुद्दे नहीं है। महिलाएं
कविता जी,
फील्ड में
डेफिनेटली हमको ट्रांसलेशन चाहिए। आप इतनी अच्छी स्टोरी बता रहे हैं, लेकिन बाकियों को अगर समझ नहीं आया तो आप वो मिस हो जाएगा।
ओके ओके
ट्रांसलेट करती हूँ कविता।
क्विकली फिर वापस आपकी तरफ हम लोग आएंगे।
Yeah, I think that Kavita is saying exactly what I was ending with, which is
Right.
that diversity in the team and the diversity of the kind of stories that we do is interlinked, and it's hard to tell them apart. She says that the expectation when we started Khabar Lahariya as a band of women was that we would do only certain kinds of stories and that there would be women-linked stories. Because that's the only kind, if women are going to be journalists at all, then they're only going to be talking about their own issues or softer issues. And so that it was always made into a point that that was not the kind of journalism that we were setting out to do. And in fact, it was going to be a local channel that was covering any story that was pertinent to the local community there. So what ended up happening and what it has developed over the last like 20 years into a distinct kind of brand of storytelling is that development stories, political stories, crime stories, anything that have local relevance and with stakeholders and respondents who are from communities often whose voices don't reach the mainstream media. And so that was the way in which we were looking at diversity, because there were voices that you never heard in mainstream papers, on front pages, in headlines. There were interviews that were never done with farmers, with especially Dalit communities, especially with women. So Khabar Lahariya set out to do all kinds of reporting that a local channel would do on all kinds of issues, but from the perspective of the marginalized voice, and so made it a point to interview and speak for voices that don't get represented in the media. It's a very underdeveloped, drought-prone, and quite violent area where Khabar Lahariya is based in the central and southeastern part of Uttar Pradesh, which is the most populous state in India.
Yeah, give us some context around that, because I was listening to Kavita and she was talking about dacoos and gangsters, dacoits.
Yeah.
And the kind of crime we're used to hearing about from those areas are these sort of mythical, Robin Hood type figures there. It is a mafiosi kind of situation. There's protection rackets. There's all kinds of pretty scary stuff. So give us some context of what you have to deal with as a journalist.
Yeah. Khabar Lahariya is based in an area which actually feels like it's either on a movie set somewhere, the Wild West of India, or it's stuck in time. It hasn't really changed a lot in the past 50 or 60 years, except that there are a lot of malls which are, interrupted with completely drought-prone fields, like you saw in the visuals of the video. But because the kind of poverty, the kind of environmental kind of degradation, climate change that have happened, and the kind of pitched caste walls that have happened in that area, it's made for a very particular kind of violence. It's allowed for gang warfare and dacoits to flourish. And over the past 40 or 50 years post-independence, where there has been, movement towards welfare and development, what's happened is that the local governments then have quite a strong nexus with the dacoos or the dacoits or the gang leaders. And so what Kavita was saying is that a lot of the reporting that we're doing is uncovering scams between the local administration and politics and these, unlawful Robin Hoods or gang leaders. And so whereas local media has vested interest in keeping those stories quiet because they're getting paid off by local administration and often also protected by these gang lords. Khabar Lahariya is an independent platform and as a platform which really both ideologically, financially, the entire model is kind of disrupting what the mainstream media model is. It has no vested interest in not covering any of those stories. So essentially what Khabar Lahariya is doing is covering all those stories which the mainstream media model is keeping silent because it has an interest in maintaining that kind of power and development and economic structure.
That's a great question here from Hannah Teo from Taboola. She's asking, how does Khabar Lahariya produce and distribute content? And is it mostly short form videos on social platforms? And I guess by this, she would probably be referring to Facebook or YouTube. Where is your distribution channel? How are you reaching those specific audiences? Maybe Kavita could answer that for us.
And then you could do a quick translation for us, Disha.
कविता, एक सवाल है हमारी वितरण के बारे में कि हम किस फॉर्मेट में खबरें करते हैं और अपने खबरों को कैसे पहुंचाते हैं लोगों तक. तो मे बी प्रिंट से लेकर के हम कैसे करते हैं वो जल्दी से बता सकते हो, फिर मैं अनुवाद करूंगी.
अच्छा, तो जब प्रिंट का हमारा 2002 से 2015 तक हम प्रिंट अखबार छापे हैं बुंदेली भाषा में और 8 पेज का अखबार था हमारा. तो जो अखबार था जो पत्रकार थी वो खबरें जाकर के लाती थी गांव-गांव से और फिर हम लोग इकट्ठा मतलब साप्ताहिक मीटिंग करते थे और वहां पर सारी जो महिला पत्रकार है वो आती थी, अपने खबरों को इकट्ठा करके सुनाती थी, प्रोडक्शन होता था, फिर हम लोग खबरों को चयन करते थे, डमी बनाते थे, डमी में डालते थे, फिर उनको हम लिखते थे. लेकिन
ये तो हम 10 दिन तक ये प्रोडक्शन मीटिंग के बारे में बात कर सकते हैं.
हाँ, तो बहुत लंबा प्रोसेस है.
एक मिनट कविता has got into the nostalgia of when we ran a newspaper and how we used to do many print stories and we would meet for editorial meetings which would go on for days and days and fight for whose story was going to hit the front page or whose story was not.
That's the way to do it.
Let's skip to the distribution because this could go on for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So now there's no print product.
The print newspaper wrapped up in 2017.
Right.
खबर लहरिया का डिजिटल वाला जो सफर है 2015-16 से कविता उसके बारे में थोड़ा बताओ.
ओके, तो बस मैं 2 पॉइंट बस और बताना चाहते कि जब प्रिंट अखबार आता था तो हम औरतें ही जाकर करते थे 2 उतनी पहुंच हमारी प्रिंट अखबार की नहीं हो पाती थी कि हर व्यक्ति तक हम गांव-गांव में पहुंचा पाए. तो हमारे लिए एक चुनौती थी. दूसरी चुनौती थी कि उतनी फंडिंग हमारे पास नहीं थी कि हम प्रिंट अखबार को लंबे टाइम तक हम छपाई दे पाएंगे. तो हमने सोचा कि जब पूरी दुनिया डिजिटल हो रही है, जब डेटा इतने सस्ते हो रहे हैं तो क्यों ना हम अब खबर लहरिया को प्रिंट से डिजिटल की तरफ जाएं. तो हम 2015 में हम हुए डिजिटल और हमने अपनी टीम को ट्रेनिंग दी. सबको हमने एक स्मार्टफोन दिया है और उसकी ट्रेनिंग दिया कि वीडियो आपको कैसे शूट करना है, कैसे ऑडियो करना है, कैसे खबरें करना है. उसकी ट्रेनिंग के बाद हमने सबको उतार दिया फील्ड में. हमारे जो रिपोर्टर्स हैं वो गांव में जाते हैं और अपने जो स्मार्टफोन है वहां पर जा करके खबरों को शूट करते हैं और सबके अपने अपने ग्रुप बने हैं. ग्रुप से वो लोग दिल्ली के लिए खबरों को भेजते हैं. वहां पर
Sorry, Kavita ji.
ट्रांसलेट करती हूँ मैं.
I actually got really excited by this. So if you don't mind, I'm going to take a stab at translating. Just to relieve you, Disha. But Kavita ji, मैं translate करता हूँ इनके लिए. So I like. So I think So Kavita is saying that they switched to digital almost completely in 2015, and the exciting thing is that they KL actually trained all their female journalists in the field to use smartphones, how to record, the intricacies of production. how you edit, and bits and pieces about quality and stuff. And I think also the basics of journalism. And I'm amazed at this transition that happened in 2015, and we're seeing the results of it now. Have I covered that okay, Disha?
Yeah.
What I'm excited by is also a related question. Of course, we're all kind of, if you have to be in media today, you have to be a product person and therefore an audience person. So I'm going to ask a question that Prodita asked. Prodita runs the conversation in Indonesia. She asks, what do you see happen after the stories from KL come out? How does it impact its audience, and how does it influence the lives of the staff? Which is a really exciting frame,
Yeah, I want to take that and go back to something that Kavita said briefly, but then she moved on to the process. Is that in the journey from going from a print newspaper, which is a tangible product that you can hold in your hand, and so when you say that it's a local language newspaper that's produced by women on the margins, and this is it, you can see it. People used to put it up on their walls in their homes, use them as calendars. It was a tangible proof of the fact that women on the margins could create media, could have influence, could have power. They also had a very, very loyal audience, because like Kavita was saying, the women themselves would go and distribute the paper, because we weren't able to have any mainstream partnership for distribution. None of the mainstream networks wanted to distribute Khabar Lahariya alongside their papers. So we couldn't scale distribution in the way that we wanted to, and that was a big reason to go digital. And the question that we're repeatedly asked from 2015 to now is that what happens to your loyal audience, who is a poor rural audience? How are they going to now engage with local news that's digital and that you have to have a smartphone for? And actually, our readership has gone from about 80,000 people at the peak of, we had 8 print editions, to about 5 million every month now. And it's a very engaged audience. So when the news comes out and it's published first on YouTube and then on our website and then on multiple social media platforms after that, we also do a lot of Facebook and YouTube lives, which are very high engagement kind of pieces of content that we do. So there's almost always immediate impact in the fact that if it's stories on how government schemes are being implemented or not being implemented in rural areas, and often, and in the COVID kind of context, we saw that when we went into villages and reported on health facilities or food relief not reaching, it was almost within hours that action was taken by the local administration. In the kind of example that was in the video that we saw earlier, irrigation canals were not being opened at the time that the fields needed to be irrigated, and because of a Khabar Lahariya story, that water was released into the field. So what we see, because Khabar Lahariya is one of the only independent and very committedly hyperlocal news platforms that exists for that region, which is a region that mainstream media doesn't really care about, action and impact happens very quickly because there's high credibility to the news and the kind of reporting that we're doing. In terms of impact on the team itself, maybe I'll pass that question to Kavita. Kavita, लोग पूछ रहे हैं कि खबर लहरिया की खबर को पब्लिश करने के बाद क्या असर होता है, तो खबरों के असर के बारे में मैंने शेयर किया है, पर टीम असर और जो हमारे रिपोर्टर्स हैं उनके ऊपर जो असर पड़ा है खबर लहरिया में जुड़ने के बाद में, उसके बारे में तुम बता सकते हो?
हाँ, मैं उसका 2 तरह से असर देखती हूँ। ये एक तो फील्ड लेवल पर जब असर होता है, और दूसरा जो टीम पर जो असर होता है खबर लहरी में जुड़ने की वजह से।
फील्ड का असर के बारे में मैंने थोड़ा बताया है।
हाँ, फील्ड के बारे में मैं ये बताऊंगी कि कई सारे ऐसे रिपोर्टर से जब जुड़े थे, लोगों ने खबर लहरिया में जुड़ करके अपनी पढ़ाई को पूरा किया है। वो उनके लिए बहुत बड़ा असर है, और आगे के लिए वो अपनी पढ़ाई को मजबूत कर पाए, क्योंकि ऐसे रिपोर्टर हमने जोड़ा था, चाहे शिव देवी हो जी, जो एकदम से वो नवसाक्षर थी, श्यामकली है, जिनको सिर्फ अपना नाम और गांव का नाम ही लिखना आता था, वो आज अपनी स्क्रिप्ट को लिख रही हैं, P2C कर रही हैं, अच्छी खबरें दे रही हैं। तो श्यामकली सहोदरा हमारे टीम में है। रिपोर्टर सहोदरा ने खबर लहरिया में जुड़ने के बाद हाई स्कूल पास किया है। श्रीदेवी ने क्या कहते हैं 8वीं पास किया है, और श्याम कली की पढ़ाई भी काफी मजबूत हो गई है। दूसरी मतलब जो ये असर हम देखें कि आर्थिक रूप में खुद का परिवार को चलाना, अपने बच्चों को पढ़ाना, खुद में जो मालकाना हक है वो उन रिपोर्टर को मिल पा रहा है, और समाज में उनकी अपनी खुद की पहचान हो रही है। तो ये भी
हूँ कविता। Or sorry, Shad, did you want to?
No. Absolutely no. That was a fantastic point. Please jump in, Disha.
Yeah, I wanted to do a paraphrase, quick translation, and then maybe also make a related point to what Kavita is saying. Is that the impact on the team is at many levels. One is that because our criteria for recruiting at Khabar Lahariya are not that the women are qualified in terms of education or media skills. So often we have women who have never been to school and whose literacy skills are really poor. And so people, after coming to Khabar Lahariya, because they get a salary, a monthly salary, unlike other media organizations who keep rural reporters on as stringers and only pay them for stories that they do or advertisements that they bring in, Khabar Lahariya pays salaries to all its reporters. So a lot of the women went back to school and completed high school or even college after coming to Khabar Lahariya. So that's been one impact. And the other is that often they are the sole earning members of their families. So the immense kind of power that comes from running the household, making decisions about education, making decisions about property. A lot of them have bought either scooters or vehicles for the family, land for the family. They've set up businesses for their quite dependent partners and fathers and brothers and so on, who are often not working. So that kind of tangible impact. And I think just to bring the conversation a little bit back to diversity and what this means for us in Khabar Lahariya as an organization is that you make a commitment to do what you will need to do to sustain diverse voices in the organization and in the newsroom. And often that means that you don't hire the best quote unquote writer or news reporter that you could. You hire someone who represents a voice that you need in that newsroom, it's important for you to mentor in that newsroom. And then you shape editorial processes and HR processes and policies so that voice can be nurtured. And so Kavita spoke about two reporters, Shyamkali and Shiv Devi, both of whom could only write their names and the names of their villages when they came to Khabar Lahariya. And they're both senior reporters in the team now and have been there for 10 years and done very strong investigative reporting. But that's because it's an investment that somebody like Kavita and Khabar Lahariya makes in constantly mentoring and constantly supporting those kinds of voices. So it's not a criminal kind of thing to do that, we want diversity and so we will just hire two people from a different background or a marginalized background. It doesn't stop there. It just starts there.
Yeah, and speaking of your reporters, here's a really great question from Miga, who is the chief sub at Inc. in Singapore, and she's asking, what sort of safety issues do your reporters face, and what kind of access do they have, to safety, when they need help?
Kavita?
हाँ दीदी बोलिए, म्यूट थी।
एक सवाल है सुरक्षा के बारे में। जब हम इस तरह की खतरनाक रिपोर्टिंग कर रहे हैं राजनीति के बारे में या डाकुओं के बारे में, तो खबर लहरिया टीम के लोगों के पास क्या सुरक्षा के माध्यम होते हैं?
ये सवाल अक्सर हमारे पास में आता है चारों तरफ से सुरक्षा को लेके, क्योंकि सुरक्षा का सवाल सिर्फ औरतों से पूछा भी जाता है। हमारे समाज में तो अभी मैं कहूंगी इसके बारे में। तो सुरक्षा को लेकर के कुछ
ट्रांसलेट करती हूँ, फिर तुम बताना। Kavita is saying that
if you could ask Kavita to do shorter segments and you keep jumping back and forth, that might be great.
It's difficult, but I'll try.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Kavita is saying that she gets this question so often and she doesn't know if male journalists get asked about safety and how they manage in the field when they're doing political reporting at all, but she does get asked a lot.
कविता जी, डाकुओं से तो मर्द भी डरते हैं।
मैं भी डरता हूँ।
मर्द क्या डरते हैं, वो डरते होंगे लेकिन वो खुद में मिले भी रहते हैं। उनका मतलब हर जगह थानों में इतना कब्जा होता है, कोतवाली में होता है, तो डरता तो सब कोई है मर्दों से, लेकिन हमने उसका सामना किया। औरतों को कुछ ज्यादा कोमल समझे हैं ना, इसलिए।
एक मिनट कविता, छोटे छोटे हिस्से में मैं अनुवाद करती हूँ ताकि लोग जुड़ पाए। Kavita saying that the situation and whether it's politics or dacoits is dangerous for all genders and everyone, but the difference is that a lot of the male journalists are kind of in with these politicians and dacoits, and they have contacts in police stations, they have contacts with politicians and stuff, so they find ways of mitigating some of those risks and dangers, whereas Khabar Lahariya has had to think about it and deal with it differently. हाँ बोलो कविता।
तो बस मैं यही बोल रही थी कि सुरक्षा वाली जो बात थी ना, कि सिर्फ हम औरतों के बारे में ही बात करते हैं। ऐसा नहीं है कि मर्द नहीं डरते हैं, सिर्फ औरतों को उस क्षेत्र में देखा जाता है। जैसे आपने भी बोला था ना कि मर्द भी तो डरते हैं, तो फिर सुरक्षा की जब बात होती है तो ज्यादातर जो हमारे दिमाग में ऐसी चीजें आ जाती है कि रेप जैसी, की छेड़खानी जैसी घटनाएं, और हाँ वो वाजिब है। तो सुरक्षा जैसे सबके लिए है, वैसे खबर लहरिया के जो हम रिपोर्टर है उनके लिए सेम है, कुछ अलग से नहीं है। यहाँ पर तो हम हमारे साथ में अगर कोई केस होता है तो हम जो वहाँ पर पुलिस स्टेशन है वहाँ पर जाते हैं। ठीक है, आप फिर मैं आगे बढ़ूंगी, आप इतना ट्रांसलेट करिए।
Yeah, so
I also want to say that we've got a whole lot of fantastic questions here, so we'll jump to those. So please excuse me for being rude and interrupting you, but I might do that. But please, yeah, no, please go for it.
Just let me know, Rishad, when you want me to.
I will.
When you
please,
want.
Absolutely. Please translate Kavita's thing. This is fascinating.
So Kavita is just saying that just in the way that men also fear dacoits, maybe more actually, that's my interjection. In the same way that security and safety applies to them is how it would apply to her and her team. And so the ways in which they would try and build a security net or access safety would be similar. So to go to the police station, to file a report. Yeah, the point she's making is that in terms of the system and in terms of institutional ways of accessing security or safety for journalists, they would do it in a similar way that men do. हाँ कविता बताओ।
हाँ, तो मैं यही बोल रही थी कि अलग से नहीं है। हम लोग पुलिस थाने में जाते हैं, हम पुलिस का सपोर्ट लेते हैं। जो लोकल की मीडिया है हम उनका सपोर्ट लेते हैं। जो हमारे सहयोगी हैं, अगर कुछ ऐसी चीज होती है उनका सपोर्ट लेते हैं। और ऐसे कई हमारे पास में लंबे केसेस हैं, अगर हम उसमें चर्चा करना चाहें तो उदाहरण के रूप में हैं भी हमारे साथ में कि ऐसे ऐसे हमको हुआ है हमारे साथ में।
Yeah, Kavita, we have a lot of kind of live examples for what we've done in certain cases, so maybe that can be a different kind of. Kavita, maybe we'll make a movie.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, हम एक फिल्म अपने से ही बना लेते हैं।
बना लेते हैं, हमारे लिए कोई इतना थोड़ा नहीं है।
About us, maybe we can tell our own.
No, absolutely, I would watch that. I would watch a feature film on Khabar Lahariya and the adventures you've had. Some of the story. So just as a quick background, Khabar Lahariya came to Beta last year, which is a little media festival we did when we could still actually meet each other in the world. 300 of us turned up in Chiang Mai, and Kavita was there, and she told these fascinating stories about meeting. One of the fascinating ones was about meeting her biggest troll on a bus. And this was a guy who had trolled her mercilessly. Kavita ji, मैं आपका story बता रहा हूँ. आपने selfie लिया था अपने troll. I don't know what the Hindi for troll is, but this guy had harassed her. There were threats, there was abuse online and offline. I mean, this guy was a complete, shall we beat this, Alan, later? But anyway, and she runs into him on a bus, I think, and she had a picture there. She said, yeah, we you know, a few months went by, and this guy, because you're a troll, he also followed Khabar Lahariya devoutly. And he met her and they chatted, and he said, can I please take a selfie with you? And it was completely respectful. Trolls being bullies, you know, usually when you meet them in person, he ended up being a fan as well. If I could just jump to...
Can I jump in there, Rishad?
Yes, of course.
Because I know that Kavita and I have talked about this incident kind of ad nauseum, and I know that you guys have probably heard Kavita's story about it, but I think that it also kind of relates a lot to what diversity means for KL, and the fact that Khabar Lahariya has never been seen as either a women-only or a Dalit-only newsroom. It's always been positioned as a local newsroom, which means that the audience actually spans a lot of upper caste men. That's actually the core constituency, because they are the ones who have the highest access to media. And a lot of Khabar Lahariya's popularity, and I think also sustenance, depends on the fact that how we engage with that audience, and then how you look at the issue of diversity, right? So you might be doing a lot of stories which are not only about issues or issues of marginalized people, but you're also taking calls about how to sustain your women journalists, how to think about safety issues when a Dalit woman journalist is reporting on an upper caste politician. So you do have to think about security and safety differently. And who are you going to talk to? Who are going to be your sources for stories? But you continue to engage with someone and people who are considered to be, you know, the part of the power structure which your organization is fundamentally critiquing. You also befriend them. I mean, I think that's been crucial for how Khabar Lahariya has survived as a diverse newsroom in the context that it does. Otherwise, we could have been, I think we could have been obliterated at any time in these 20 years, but we have survived. Sorry, that was tangential.
Yeah, so let me jump in here. A really great question from Sanjay Biswas, who asked, you know, how would you, and I'm trying to compress basically 3 questions into one here. How would you build something like that from scratch again, right? So basically the advice that you would give to any newsroom or upcoming newsroom that wants to have diversity built into it, in terms of having the right training and having the right kind of mindset. How do you build that DNA within a news organization that's about to start, or is, you know, or has already been running?
Yeah, let me ask Kavita to respond, and then I can add to what she thinks. Kavita, एक सवाल है कि अगर शुरुआत से खबर लहरिया जैसी संस्था को शुरू करना हो, तो क्या लगता है कि क्या करना चाहिए? अगर तुम शॉर्ट में बता सकते हो, फिर मैं जोड़ सकती हूँ। तुम्हें क्या लगता है कि 2-3 चीजें जो अनिवार्य है, जो लोगों को करनी चाहिए?
हमें लगता, जो मेरे को लगता है सबसे अनिवार्य है कि आपको विविधता लाना पड़ेगा। जैसे खबर लहरिया में जब तक आप विविधता के बारे में नहीं सोचोगे, तब तक आपका पूरा काम अधूरा रह जाता है।
विविधता से तुम क्या तुम्हारा मतलब क्या है?
विविधता से मेरा मतलब ये है कि बराबरी का दर्जा हो, चाहे रिपोर्टिंग में हो, चाहे स्टाफ में हो, चाहे ग्रामीण लेवल पर हो, कि आप कहाँ की खबरें लाना चाहते हैं, आपके पास में ग्रामीण इलाके की खबरें हो, हर तरह के मुद्दे की रिपोर्टिंग हो, आपके न्यूज रूम में हर जाति के लोग हो, या तो मैं यही कहूँ कि जो वंचित लोग हैं, अगर उनको मौका आप दे पाओ, वो सबसे बेस्ट होगा उनके लिए।
एक मिनट में इसको ट्रांसलेट कर। Kavita saying that the first thing that she thinks is essential is to have diversity or bring diversity into the organization. So I asked her what she meant by that. And she's saying both these things, that you ensure that you're covering a wide range of stories from a wide range of perspectives, but also that you have representation within the newsroom, and especially from those who are from marginalized communities. इसको कैसे किया जा सकता है?
कैसे किया जा सकता है? हम आके ट्रेनिंग दे देंगे।
And if you want to do it, then Kavita can come and show you how to do it. But it's a lot of training and mentoring.
I love that she jumped in with a marketing pitch. आप मार्केटिंग भी कर रहे हैं
ट्रेनिंग के
कविता
लिए
जी?
सिर्फ खबर लहरिया ही है जो ऐसी ट्रेनिंग दे सकते हैं और कोई ऐसा ऑर्गेनाइजेशन।
Fantastic. She's
All
saying
I can do it. So if
anybody
one,
who needs diversity training, Kavita is saying we can do it Khabar Lahariya style.
can I
I'm
just
gonna-
so I just wanted to add to Kavita's response.
Absolutely.
I'll make it very quick. Is that I totally agree and echo what Kavita is saying. But I also think that Khabar Lahariya is unique because it's got people like Kavita, and it's also got people like me and Shalini and Pooja and many of us. And I think that there's a particular synergy and energy and dynamic that happens because there are people with privilege alongside people who have been historically kept from privilege. And it works because the two work together, because I mean, I could say that I may be better at writing or better at commissioning a story, but I take that all. I mean, we're reflexive in a way that we know what the power structure is and how important it is that Kavita, as the editor-in-chief, holds complete editorial autonomy and controls what content will be published. And that there are certain skills and certain support mechanisms, certain business planning that maybe needs a certain access, and people like me, like Pooja, like Shalini bring that into the Khabar Lahariya newsroom to be able to facilitate a diverse newsroom. But to be constantly kind of reflexive and critical about the power structure within the newsroom, who has the right to say what, even who has the right to visibilize marginalized identities. I mean, there are some people in the Khabar Lahariya newsroom who don't want to make their identities, their ethnical identities, their religious identities, or their caste identities public. And so it's not the prerogative of the leadership or the management of the organization to say, no, you know, everyone will say that they are Dalit or they are Muslim or they are Adivasi. If they don't want to, then they don't have to. So the thing of being very conscious of who holds power and in what way, and how can decision making be transparent and shared, I think that's really, really important.
I just want to jump in here with questions, Disha and Kavita. So I want to ask Monica's question. Monica works at Jesuit Media in Melbourne. She's saying that your story is inspirational. We've adopted a similar approach of giving voice to those that the mainstream media don't publish. What is your funding model, and how has diversity played to that? And how has that been impacted by COVID-19?
कविता, उनका सवाल है जो फंडिंग मॉडल के ऊपर है, तो मैं थोड़ा जवाब देती हूँ और फिर
ठीक है, तो मैं तब तक में जान जाती हूँ। हाँ, हम म्यूट कर ले रहे हैं।
So we run as a I would say sustainable for-profit business, although we haven't really been making any profit. The funding model has historically been via grants, and Khabar Lahariya also has had a long trajectory of being seen more as a development project and a niche kind of development project, to moving more and more into the development space. And so into the media space, and as we move more into the media space, I think that the idea of what kind of business model would work for this kind of independent and also media that's located geographically in an area where there are not advertisers, there's a very low consumption. So the possibility of tapping into the sources of advertising and money that other independent organizations have, because there are a lot of now independent digital platforms who are experimenting with many different models, but still cater to predominantly urban privileged audiences. What we do is we partner with different kinds of organizations who are interested in commissioning stories that we do on the ground. That's one of our forms of revenue. We also have a unique kind of access because we've built a team from scratch who are journalists who are also researchers. So we can provide services like research, embedded kind of immersive qualitative research, market insights, and so on about rural India. And because rural India is becoming quite interesting for businesses as well as philanthropic organizations now. There are quite a lot of interesting business opportunities in terms of partnering with people who do have money, who see interest in rural areas, and how can we subsidize the news part of what we do, which no one is paying for and which we don't take any money for, by doing other kinds of rural content that might have national and international relevance. We just launched a subscription product in partnership with the Google News Initiative last year. It's called Sound Fury and 4G. So it's a paid product, which is a fortnightly multimedia story that you get from Khabar Lahariya. It's based on Khabar Lahariya reporters' stories. It's themed around youth in rural India, the direction that they're taking and so on. And we really think that drawing on this unique kind of voice, but for a global audience, and trying to get people to pay for that is one exciting, business idea. So it's touch and go like all other independent media, I would think. But we've managed to survive for 2 decades by experimenting with different models, some of which have worked for other people, some of which work for us. But yeah.
There's a quick question from Chris, who says, how did your audience follow you digitally? Are there a number of different channels apart from Facebook, YouTube, Twitter?
WhatsApp is very heavily used. We tap into, we have a whole range of WhatsApp groups which have local influencers, but also just, normal people who sign up for the news service. So WhatsApp, but YouTube is our highest distribution source, and it's the most heavily engaged. Facebook and YouTube between them. We also use Instagram and Twitter for different kinds of outreach. So we do a lot of translation and repurposing of content so that it can be relevant to different audiences. We've also done videos for TikTok, which is really, really popular in India. So we try and be kind of flexible. I think that's what is at the core of how KL has survived all of these years.
Hey, I'm still stunned by the fact that, first of all, it's not just the obvious platforms, but you're also on TikTok. How do you think about the TikTok audience, and how do you work with it? How do you engage them? And what do you know about that TikTok audience that you're serving?
I got to get Kavita in on this, who's very active. Kavita?
हाँ मम्मी उठी आ रही है।
हाँ, हम वितरण के बारे में बात कर रहे थे, खबर लहरिया की स्टोरीज का वितरण और कौन से प्लेटफॉर्म्स पर हैं। तो कहा कि हम टिकटॉक भी अब इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं, तो ये है कि टिकटॉक के ऑडियंस के साथ हम किस तरह से जुड़ते हैं, किस तरह का कंटेंट बनाते हैं, क्यों टिकटॉक पर हैं।
मुझे लगता है कि टिकटॉक कितना फेमस हो गया है और उसमें छोटे छोटे जो वीडियो आते हैं ना, और लोग तुरंत में देखते हैं, वायरल भी हो जाते हैं। तो अभी हम क्या करते हैं कि जो ग्रामीण की खबरें हैं, जब हमारे रिपोर्टर्स जा रहे हैं तो वहां को वो टिकटॉक के थ्रू वो वीडियो को बनाते हैं, क्योंकि ज्यादातर जो टिकटॉक में तो मजाकिया चीजें चलती हैं। लेकिन हमने जोड़ा कि क्यों ना हम टिकटॉक में भी हम विकास के मुद्दे हैं, गांव की जो समस्याएं हैं, हम उसको दिखाएं ताकि ज्यादा से ज्यादा लोग उसमें जुड़े।
So I will do a translation with a twist. Khabar Lahariya has always been seen as this very serious, non-humorous kind of news platform because we do serious reporting, and it's, and even though the reporters and the editor themselves are pretty, feisty and have a quite sharp local sense of humor. So I think the attempt is always that the digital medium allows you to experiment with voice in a way that print doesn't. And so we've experimented with different social media platforms from that perspective. Kavita is saying that the reporters go into villages and where they would do like a fairly conventional 5-minute video on a development issue or something like that. There it's often interesting to do a shorter video, but on a development issue, and use a platform which is so popular and that has entertainment as its kind of core value, but kind of turn that on its head and also, push out this content there. So I think that it's for me, it's an attempt both to try and bring a local kind of voice and and liberate the reporters to say that you don't have to keep proving yourself to be serious journalists in this way. You can also have some levity and use what social media is giving you. But you can also turn a platform on its head, or at least you can keep trying to push what a platform is doing otherwise. I think that's quite exciting.
I just wanted to ask a question that Christine from Thompson asked. She's saying that, can you expand on your audience growth and engagement since you began? How do you stay in touch with your audience's preferences, interests, consumption, and how do you know the ratio of female and male users? You mentioned earlier that you saw a predominance in urban male users. How do you track growth? How do you track your audience's preferences?
I'll ask Kavita to respond briefly and then I'll come in. Kavita, लोग पूछ रहे हैं कि हम अपने ऑडियंस के बारे में क्या और कैसे जानते हैं और बढ़ता हुआ ऑडियंस को हम किस तरह से पहचान पाते हैं कि उनको क्या देखना है?
थोड़ी आप इसके बारे में बताएंगे या मैं शुरू करूं फिर आप बताएंगे?
हाँ, तुम शुरू करो फिर मैं बताऊंगी।
तो हमें ये लगता है कि जो मैं भी ताजा उदाहरण देना चाहती हूँ कि कैसे लोग जुड़ते हैं, कितना लोग पसंद करते हैं, हमको कैसे पता चलता है। तो इस लॉकडाउन के दौरान
main virtues, I just wanted to say. She's just saying that I'll give you a fresh example of how popular our content is, just so that you can understand.
बोलो।
हाँ।
इस लॉकडाउन के दौरान जब कोरोना महामारी को लेकर के जब पूरे भारत को लॉकडाउन किया गया और भारत के कोने कोने से, दुनिया के कोने कोने जो हमारे बुंदेलखंड के जो मजदूर थे वहां पर फंसे, और मैंने एक अपना लाइव करके डाला था, अपना नंबर भी डाला था उस लाइव में। वहां से इतने फोन आए खबर लहरिया के नाम से, लोगों ने खबर लहरिया को हेल्पलाइन के रूप में जब इस्तेमाल किया, तब हमें लगा कि इतने सारा जो गरीब है, जो मजदूर वर्ग है, वो खबर लहरिया को फॉलो करता है, वो खबर लहरिया को देखता है, उनको इतना विश्वास है कि हमारी आवाज खबर लहरिया सुनेगी। तो कई तरह के जब कमेंट आते हैं सोशल मीडिया में और जब लोग अपनी समस्याओं को शेयर करते हैं, उससे हम समझ पाते हैं। आगे आप जुड़िएगा।
So Kavita is saying that from a really recent example, reporting and live broadcast that we were doing during the lockdown, I think that it's really opened up our, I mean, we were always accessing the analytics on Facebook and YouTube and so on. But I think that broadcasting during the lockdown really opened our eyes to the extent of the growth that's happened over the last 3 or 4 years, because when Kavita did live broadcasts on the plight of migrants, and Bundelkhand, Uttar Pradesh sends the highest number of construction laborers in the whole world, both nationally and internationally. But Bundelkhand, because it's such a underdeveloped area, is responsible for, maybe 50 or 60% of that entire proportion of labor. So we were doing a lot of reporting on the plight of migrant labor coming back, and those reports were being seen by people in migrant pathways across the country. So in Maharashtra, in Haryana, in Punjab, in Gujarat, in Tamil Nadu, and people were then reaching out to us either via the comments on the lives or calling us, because Kavita gave her phone number in the broadcast. So people were calling from all across the country and saying that we have family here, and this is what we need. And so it became like a default kind of helpline of sorts, but it also reinforced for us that even though we always see ourselves as a very hyperlocal platform, only focused on this small slip of central India, actually we have an audience that's quite broad-based in the Middle East, across the country, wherever migrants are moving around. They're also accessing Khabar Lahariya's news because they want news from home in the local language.
Yeah, that's right. I'm always amazed by just the sheer size of your audience, right? It's not just those who are in UP itself, but also all around the region, right? We've got a really good question here from Raven Lim, who runs Mia Vox, which is a podcasting service. So naturally, she's asking a podcast question. The question is, have you tried podcasting?
कविता,
हाँ हाँ,
एक सवाल है एक संस्था से जो पॉडकास्ट करते हैं कि हमने कभी पॉडकास्ट ट्राई किया है, क्या अनुभव रहा है?
हमने किया पॉडकास्ट और अभी भी हमारा चलता है जो लव गुरु है ना, हमने वहाँ पर जो लोगों की लव स्टोरियां होती हैं उनका हम पॉडकास्ट करते हैं। तो आप अच्छा अनुभव रहा है। लोग अपनी कहानियों को जो लोग फेस टू फेस या कैमरे में नहीं बताना चाहते हैं उसका वो लोग पॉडकास्ट के जरिए करते हैं। तो काफी अच्छा चलता है, रिस्पॉन्स भी आता है। आप हमारे यूट्यूब चैनल में जाके उनको सुन सकते हैं। हालांकि हिंदी में है तो पता नहीं। और इसके पहले हम बीच बीच में अगर कोई खबरें होती हैं तो हम उसका भी कई बार पॉडकास्ट कर लेते हैं।
So Kavita is saying that, and I have to say that there was another marketing pitch slipped in there that you have to go and check out our podcast. We have a YouTube channel, it's Khabar Lahariya at YouTube. She's talking about one audio program that we do called Love Guru, which we've run for the last 3 years. It's probably the longest running, except for Kavita's own opinion show. It's probably the longest running show that we've done, which is an agony aunt kind of podcast in a way. I mean, people send in all kinds of stories of love that is happening or not happening, and then we have an in-house kind of expert who addresses those, and that's been a really popular audio program. We've also done podcasts on stories. I mean, a lot of them have been stories around romance and sexuality, I think, issues that people definitely don't want to come on camera for. But sometimes there are stories that we do where, for example, we've often thought about doing a story around survivors of dacoit violence, because those dacoits still exist in that area, and any kind of eyewitness reports are highly vulnerable to, witnesses being attacked later on. So even crime is something that's interesting to think about as a podcast. But I will say that even though it's an exciting medium for us to experiment with, our audience does lean heavily towards the visual format. And so a big reason, I think, for the Khabar Lahariya journalists to so quickly come into video reporting, and also our audience to, peak as it has, is because the video format has really, really worked for us in the rural context.
I'm loving the comments and questions coming in here. This is really exciting. We're going to send them all out. I like that Eva, who's a data journalist of international repute, much like Jan Oak, and they work together. Eva said that really interesting business idea to sell research services about difficult to access populations to fund news by and for those populations. I like that, naturally she's productizing that. One question I wanted to ask that Monica asked again is, and by the way, she said she spent her, one of her birthdays, I've lost the number, Monica, but you spent one of your birthdays in Chitrakoot, so she knows the context.
कविता, कोई है ऑडियंस में जो चित्रकूट में अपना जन्मदिन मना चुकी हैं?
ऑस्ट्रेलिया से।
मतलब क्या चांसेस हैं? ऑस्ट्रेलिया से हैं।
So she's asking whether
हाँ, सेंट के जमाने में साथ हमने केक तो काटा था किसी का।
नहीं, meet Kavita saying that she remembers cutting somebody's cake. She doesn't remember who.
Monica, your birthday, it's possible that your birthday was celebrated by Kavita.
I can't recall, but I'm sure it wasn't her, because I would remember. Your story is absolutely inspirational, so I'm very much enjoying this. Now I'll be quiet and start listening again.
So Monica asked, do you have external contributors as well, or is everybody on staff? And if so, how do you provide support for them?
Sorry, can you just repeat that, Rishad? I didn't hear.
Sorry, can you hear me okay now?
Yeah.
So Monica asked whether you had external contributors as well, or is everybody on staff? And if external, how do you provide support?
The core of the model has been that we have recruited, especially for doing the kind of stories that we want to, because there haven't really been other available resources that we wanted to have producing the news reports. But over time, we've kind of experimented, I guess, with having stringers and having contributors. The challenge has really been then, to not compromise on the criteria that we have for who will report, who will be the reporting voice. And that's really been a non-negotiable for Khabar Lahariya. So even if we have social media managers and we have fundraising people who may be privileged and elite, the reporting and the news producing staff is always women from marginalized communities, because once you start compromising on that, then it's very easy to kind of have a newsroom that's not really looking different from any other newsroom in the country. Yeah, I mean, we've toyed with the idea of having opening up to having people contribute, but having women contribute, having women from certain communities contribute, doing fellowships for them, being able to pay for stories and raise money for that. So yeah, so that's how we have contributors. But by and large, the bulk of the content is produced by the in-house team.
Okay, so we're just going to wrap this up soon, but I just wanted to make sure. I mean, you look at the chat box. There's so many questions for you, Kavita and Disha. There's so many people who are just so inspired by the work that both of you do. So let's do a quick open mic. Hannah has a question, and probably more than one question, if I can tell. Hannah, why don't you jump in with yours?
Hi, Kavita and Disha. Thank you so much for your time today. This has been super educational, super inspiring. I'm curious about your newsroom setup, just because you have a whole bunch of different reporters reporting on different areas of focus. So my question is your current newsroom set up in a central location, or has your team of journalists always kind of worked remotely due to distance between location and areas of focus or reporters' beats?
कविता, वो ढांचे के बारे में पूछ रहे हैं सवाल कि हमारा ढांचा किस तरह से रहता है, एक जगह में सारे रिपोर्टर्स हैं या किस तरह से, और क्या हमेशा से इस तरह से रहा है कि अलग अलग जगह में रिपोर्टर्स हैं? तो ढांचे के बारे में।
ढांचा हमारा शुरू से ही ऐसे रहा कि अलग अलग जिलों में, हर जिले में 2 रिपोर्टर्स हैं। तो जैसे जो अभी हमारा इलाका है यूपी और एमपी का इलाका हमने लिया है, अनुराज में हम जाना चाहते हैं, तो हर जिले में 2 रिपोर्टर्स हैं। हर तरह की बीट को इकट्ठा करते हैं और व्हाट्सएप के जरिए भेजते हैं और फिर खबर एडिट होके पब्लिश होती है। तो
मैं थोड़ा ट्रांसलेट करती हूँ। तो at the moment the situation is that it's quite a decentralized and dispersed network of reporters. So there are 2 reporters in each district, and we're geographically in Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh. And people communicate over WhatsApp, so they're connected both in terms of editorial feedback and mentoring, and also sending their stories via WhatsApp and Gmail, basically. But in the past, with the print editions, we had quite self-contained and editorially autonomous units of 6 to 10 women in each district. So they would take all editorial calls, and they would, function quite independently. And we would have a small team in Delhi who did basically fundraising. Now we have this dispersed network, and then we have a team of about 8 or 9 people in the Delhi office who basically edit the content and publish the content, and then do outreach and business stuff and stuff like that. So that's what it's structured like right now.
I just wanted to say, please jump in, with an open mic, Mriga, even if you're sleepy. I caught that yawn. No, but I just wanted to say, please feel free to jump in, unmute, chat, get a drink. Does anybody need a 2-minute break?
I actually need a 1-minute break to get the power cable. So
absolutely. And yes, Seher, please jump in with a question. We would love that.
Hello. I have a question for Kavita ji specifically, if that's okay.
Of course.
Yeah.
And we'll try desperately. And you don't need translation.
Yeah, I can manage my Hindi. It's not great, but I can manage. तो कविता जी जो आप खबरें लिखते हैं और मतलब अगर कोई एक स्टोरी निकली जो slightly थोड़ा शायद डेंजरस है रिपोर्ट करना उस पे, या फिर कुछ खतरा है उसमें रिपोर्ट करना, तो मतलब आपको वो करेज कहाँ से आती है, मतलब उसको वो स्टोरी के साथ चिपकने के लिए और रिपोर्ट करने के लिए?
कहाँ से आती है मतलब? हमने ऐसे
मतलब
अपने आप को स्थापित किया है, ये हमारे दिमाग में हमने मेंटली हमने स्थापित किया है कि कितनी भी डेंजरस स्टोरी होगी, वही तो हमने चुनौती लिया है ना इस दुनिया की और इस समाज की, और वो हमने करने गए। सबसे जो डेंजरस स्टोरी होती है वो डाकुओं की हुई है, और मैं तो डाकुओं के घरों तक, इलाकों तक गई हूँ, जंगलों में के बीच में। और जो घोटाले की ये स्टोरी होती है जिसको अन्य मीडिया करना भी नहीं चाहता है, और उसमें हमें धमकियां मिलती है। मेरी एक रिपोर्टर है, शिव देवी नाम है, उसको खदानों से 2 बार धमकियां मिली, लोगों ने बंदूक लेकर के पिछले महीना लॉकडाउन में ही घेरा मारने के लिए। तो अगर हम दब जाएंगे तो फिर ग्रामीण आवाजें भी दब जाएंगी।
मैं ट्रांसलेट करूं? Oh no, you don't need translation. Sorry, or is someone going to translate for everyone else?
अच्छा, सबको समझ में आ जाएगा?
Everybody else needs a translation, because these are really fascinating things. I love that Seher asked, how do you do this? How are you, like, where does your courage come from?
And Kavita, like, what do you mean?
What do you mean courage?
Right,
what are you talking about?
Whole power structure. Obviously, we're going to have the courage to do it.
No, and please continue, Disha, with the translation. People need to hear this.
Yeah, I think that, it's very difficult to translate the essence of what she's saying, which is basically that when she entered into this domain and she's leading a media organization which is counterintuitive to everything that we know in India, that who will produce and who will consume and how will this run and how will this survive. So it comes with having made that decision, and she says that it's a constant kind of battle that you have with yourself, but it's also to reaffirm and to find that courage. But it's just something that's inbuilt in her. And she's talking about 2 of her reporters, Shiv Devi particularly, who has reported quite extensively on illegal mining that happens, stone quarrying and sand mining that happens in that area, and has been threatened by mine owners and contractors and politicians, because as far as they know, she's a neo-literate Dalit woman who has no right to be asking these questions, let alone be creating quite influential media. So at some level, it is in Kavita, but it's also a part of maybe the DNA of the reporters in the team, and it's very consciously kind of sustained.
And the idea that this reporter was being threatened by men with guns, which is like crazy. Sorry, Kavita ji, आप continue कीजिएगा.
नहीं, मैं बोल रही थी कि चूंकि भारत में भी ये था ना कि जो यूपी की सरकार जो थी वो गौ माता को लेके बड़े बड़े प्रोग्राम चले, और ठंडियों के टाइम में जब गायों की हत्या हुई या हत्या की गई या गौशाला में इतनी सारी बड़ी संख्या में गाय बीमार होके मरी, हमारी रिपोर्टर्स जब गौशाला के अंदर गई, वहां पर जब रिपोर्टिंग करके लाई तो किस तरह की धमकियां मिली। वो गौशाला की उच्च जाति के लोग रिपोर्टर के घर तक गए, बंदूक ले करके गए और बोले कि अगर ये स्टोरी छपी तो आप समझ लेना। तो मतलब ये धमकियां हमारे लिए आम बात हो गई है, और हमने जीना इनके साथ में सीख लिया। खबर लहरिया का उद्देश्य ये है कि जो आवाज दबेगी वो आवाज को हम बाहर लाएंगे।
Yeah, I think so. One thing that she said last time as well, and that I forgot to translate, was that if she loses courage, then it's so many millions of voices of women in rural areas or marginalized voices that are going to be silenced. So it's really important that she doesn't. And she was giving the example, again, it's Shiv Devi's story that she's talking about. We have a right-wing government at the center and in Uttar Pradesh at the moment, and a big issue that they do, kind of mobilize around is saving the cow, which is an important kind of Hindu symbol. And so in Bundelkhand, which is the region that we are based in, because there's such drought, every year there's a lot of cattle that get let go. I mean, older cattle or cattle that farmers can't afford to feed or take care of anymore just get left loose, and a lot of them die or they're killed. Although the state government has ostensibly released a lot of money to build shelters for these sick and old cows, those shelters are in a terrible state. And so we've been doing a lot of reporting around how these cows are treated in those shelters, which are government shelters. And because Shiv Devi was covering the death and the terrible condition of cows in those shelters, she had these men with guns coming and threatening her to her house. And how dare you do that kind of reporting? So, yeah.
Anybody else? I just popped a question into the chat. Christine, thank you for coming. Christine Galway. Okay, yes, please go ahead.
Lokir from Suja, Pakistan.
Lovely to hear from you. Please ask.
जब marginalized लोगों की रिपोर्टिंग करते हैं, हम लोग भी कुछ इसी तरह मिलता जुलता काम कर रहे हैं, तो आमतौर पे उसके बाद फिर आपका दिल करता है कैंपेन मोड में जाने को भी। कोई इस तरह का इशू होता है जिसको सिर्फ रिपोर्ट कर देना काफी नहीं होता, तो अपने आप को रोकना बड़ा मुश्किल होता है।
आपकी आवाज कट रही है।
अब आवाज आ रही है मेरी?
तौकीर, मैं कोशिश करती हूँ फिर से दोहराना, तो अब आप बता दीजिए अगर वो सही था सवाल।
जी जी प्लीज।
तौकीर जी बोल रहे हैं कविता कि जब इस तरह के हाशिए पर रहने वाले लोगों के बारे में या उनकी खबर हम करते हैं, तो नॉर्मली ये होता है कि सिर्फ खबर करना उतना नहीं है ना, खबर के आगे क्या करेंगे, क्योंकि वो मुद्दा सिर्फ पब्लिक में रखने से कुछ होगा या ना होगा, तो वो उस पर हमारी रणनीति क्या है, या हमें कभी लगता नहीं है कि खबर के आगे भी हमको कुछ करना चाहिए?
Disha, sorry, Kavita ji. Disha, could you also translate the question quickly for everyone before Kavita jumps in? Sorry, Kavita, मैं translation पूछ रहा था Disha से.
Yeah, I think the question was about when we're doing stories which involve marginalized voices or around something that's incidents that have happened to marginalized communities, then isn't there a temptation to move into the activist or campaign mode? And is it enough to just break the story?
Great question.
तो जब हम फील्ड में जाते हैं ना, तो बहुत सारे लोग हमसे भी उम्मीद करते हैं कि हम आए हैं तो उनका काम करवा देंगे, उनकी समस्या का हल हम कर देंगे। हम वहाँ पर जा करके बोलते हैं कि हम रिपोर्टर्स हैं, हम खबर की निकालने की वजह से अगर आपकी खबर में असर होता है और आगे कार्रवाई होती है तो वेरी गुड। और 75% कई बार खबरों में ऐसे होता है कि जब हम उस खबर को लेकर के अधिकारी से मिलते हैं, अगर अधिकारियों से संबंधित न्यूज है तो हम अधिकारी के पास में जाते हैं, अगर एनजीओ से संबंधित नहीं है तो हम एनजीओ के पास में जाते हैं, और हम उसका जब सोशल मीडिया में जाते हैं, जब खबर पब्लिश होती है तो इसमें एक्शन लिया गया है, तो वो हमारा एक चारा है। और अगर हमें ये लगता है कि ये हम नहीं कर पा रहे तो जो संबंधित एनजीओ है तो हम उनको वहाँ भेज देते हैं। हमारा काम है खबर को छापना, न कि पैरवी करना।
So Kavita is saying, and this is actually an issue that we struggle with a lot. I mean, I think we have over 20 years. In each training that we do, it's something that comes up. That what is the line between being a journalist and an activist, and is that really real? Is that really a separation that we can carry or not carry? Kavita is saying that we see our responsibility as bringing that story into the public domain, breaking the story, not doing advocacy and not campaigning and not taking the issue forward. She's also saying that in 75% in about 75% of cases, action does happen because of the nature of the reporting that Khabar Lahariya is known to do, that we do go far into places and we do quite rigorous reporting, so action does get taken. I talked about that earlier as well. But we don't see it as a part of our role to actively carry on campaigning or doing activism around that issue. I would say what we do is do a lot of sustained reporting. So where other journalists or other media, and I would say this both in terms of local media and also media from outside who parachutes in occasionally to rural areas to do big stories about drought, about elections, and so on. There'll be a story that happens once, and then nothing else. And what Khabar Lahariya does as a local media channel is that we will go back again and again and again. So we've done stories in villages of Banda, where Kavita is from, for example, where entire villages are suffering from tuberculosis, which is a disease that ostensibly should have been wiped out, many years ago. It has been wiped out all across the world. But whole villages and generations of people have tuberculosis, and this is something that has never been reported on. So we've gone back month after month or year after year to trace what is the journey of this disease in that area and what is the government doing about it. So I would say that we keep saying that we're not activists and we're journalists, but I think that the identities are fused in some way, and it's a journalism that passionately believes that we have a role in shifting the power structure and speaking truth to power. And so if that is also us being activists, then we are in a way.
मैं ये भी बोल रही थी ना कि लोगों की जब बाहर की आवाज आना कि उनको एक मीडिया में जगह मिली है, किसी गांव की खबर को हम जगह देके अगर प्रशासन तक, सरकार तक उनकी आवाज पहुंचाई है तो वो भी एक तरह की सुनवाई ही है, और उसके आगे फिर ये प्रोसेस शुरू हो जाता है कार्रवाई का। तो हम वहां पर जा करके हम विकास नहीं करा रहे हैं, हम वहां पे जाके खड़ंजा नहीं डलवा रहे हैं, हम वहां पे जाके हैंडपंप नहीं गड़वा रहे हैं, लेकिन हमारी वजह से हम एक मेन स्रोत हैं जिसकी वजह से वहां तक प्रशासन जाता है, वहां पर सरकार के लोग जाते हैं, जांच बैठती है और वहां पे कार्रवाई शुरू होती है, विकास होता है, न्याय मिलता है लोगों को।
Kavita saying that the fact that voices which do not reach the administration because of the kind of reporting that Khabar Lahariya does in itself is a form of social work and activism. Because of that, just by virtue of that voice reaching where it reaches, action happens and the administration takes cognizance of issues that they otherwise wouldn't be. So even though we're not physically getting roads made and wells dug, those things are happening because of the reports.
अरे ताजे उदाहरण है, इस लॉकडाउन के दौरान कितने गांवों को खाना हमने बांटा है, कितने गरीबों को राशन खबर लहरिया की वजह से गया है। देश के अलग अलग कोने में, अलग अलग राज्यों में जो लोग फंसे हुए थे, उन्होंने हमको फोन किया, हमने सोशल मीडिया में डाला, हमने ट्वीट किया, हमने सरकार से बोला और लोगों के घर तक अनाज पहुंचा, लोगों घर में चूल्हे जले। अब इससे ज्यादा और क्या हो सकता है?
Kavita is saying again about the current context and COVID, where there has been so much hunger because of the kind of poverty that exists in Bundelkhand. And because of Khabar Lahariya's consistent reporting, people have had regular food, both dry rations and also cooked food reaching villages and households, which it would not have. And so what beyond that is activism.
That's amazing. I think we're just going to have to wrap it up here. It's people are starting to drop off, and also we've had an amazing conversation. And if you just look at the chat box, you can see the inspiration that both of you have provided for this community here. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us, not just about the work you do, but also how you think about diversity. I think it's given all of us something to take away and to really think about. So I'm going to stop the recording right now, and with that we can start bringing out our beverages and just hang out and just chill for a little bit. If any of you are still available and you are not rushing off somewhere, feel free to go fetch a beverage and join us again in about 3 minutes.
Yes, looking forward to hanging out and chatting for a bit.